maybe some people have some. Oh, continue. Okay. It looks like most people answer the I know what it is and have some knowledge. So that's pretty cool. Just wanted to kind of get a understanding of the landscape of the audience so that we can kind of figure out where we want to start. So awesome. So let's do one more question here. I think this question you can pick more than one answer. Yes, it's multiple answers. So you can click all of them, one of them, none of them. It's okay if you don't click on about urushipen.com. I won't hate on you. Excellent. Okay. All right. So we'll probably put a little bit more time on the topic of how urushi pens are made, and then we'll maybe cover some of the other topics there. All right. Excellent, guys. Thank you. And appreciate people participating. I think that's kind of just cool to see what everybody's feelings are on this topic and where their knowledge level is with Urushi and Maki-E. So just a quick introduction. My name is Jason. I'm the president and sales manager of urushipen.com. It's a online e-commerce for Urushi and Maki-E fountain pens, and we exclusively currently deal Danitrio fountain pens. So we'll kind of jump into Urushi first, and then we'll talk about some of the other things. So kind of show you my agenda here today. So as far as introductions, I think you guys know who I am now. We've kind of been in the business for a couple years now, and have met probably some of you maybe at some of the shows. We haven't done any of the Midwest shows yet, but hope to maybe resume going to them physically when things start opening back up. I know this is one of those shows that is kind of at that transitionary period when the requirements have started to lift. So, but has always been fun. Always get to meet really interesting people with a lot of great pen stories and amazing pens that they're carrying. So definitely, looking forward to meeting people in real life. But this is, at least, a great, meeting in virtual spirit. So we're going to start with the introduction and then Urushi pen preview. And then we'll talk about the Urushi pen making process, and then featured pen presentation, which will showcase some of the Danitrio pens that we have. And then we can go into a Q&A session. So I think something that you guys may be aware, if you are familiar with Danitrio, they've been around since, you can see it on their logo. I think they say 1974. So they've been around for a while. I would describe them as a kind of mom and pop's company. They're a smaller brand. However, they're a very distinguished brand. They've been able to continually work with their artisans over the years to be able to produce very, very high quality pen products. And something that they always vouch for is that, pretty much the majority of their lineup are Maki-E artisans. And so the distinguishing difference between an Urushi artisan and a Maki-E artisan is typically a Maki-E artisan has even more years of experience with applying urushi lacquering. It doesn't necessarily have to be on fountain pens. It can be on tea ceremony pieces, other types of lacquerware, jewelry, all sorts of stuff. But also very commonly, they are then also recognized by the Japanese government for their crafts. So that's something that's very interesting in Japanese culture, is they are very proud of kind of their history, their heritage. And so they have kind of inbuilt into their, current culture and society, like trying to maintain and sustain this. There has been a lot of Western influences over time, which it's not always a bad thing either. And so there has been a reduction of artisans over the years. I I don't know what the count is now, but I know when I spoke with Danitrio, they were thinking that it's probably under 50 that are Maki artisans and Urushi artisans in Japan. Um, Not sure where the number comes from, but it's definitely on the decline. And so anybody who takes it up, it's just a very highly respected kind of role, because they're able to kind of maintain and continue this long legacy. Awesome. So let me do a little bit of a preview. So this one is a video from YouTube. And so one of the Danitrio artisans, their artisan name is Kogaku. And he is probably one of their, I'll say one of my favorite, at least, artisans in the Danitrio lineup. And he has a YouTube channel called Kogaku. And this is a little video from them that has a kind of a good little overview of some of the Maki-E work that they're doing, and kind of give people a little bit more exposure. All right. Yeah, so just very, very elegant work that they are always performing, and so intricate. So you can kind of see, like, when they're working with Maki-E. So for those who are not familiar with the term Maki-E, it describes the powder that's used. So it can be the form of gold powders or silver, platinum type of powders, and it's usually sprinkled over the pen, and then they'll do some sort of polishing process, and then it'll get it either smooth, or maybe they'll leave it bumpy, depending on what kind of texture that they want to create on the pen. And so when they're applying, like, the Maki-E, for example, onto the pen, they usually use this kind of like tubular piece with a little kind of spoon curve at the end. And so they'll like kind of just tap on this little straw, and then the powder will kind of slowly be sprinkled across, and they do it really, like, well, and must have some sort of calibrated hands to be able to do this, and they can scatter very evenly across the entire pen. Sometimes they may want to focus on a particular area, so there's different ways. I think I've heard of some people also, like, blowing through the straw and are able to puff just the right amount of force to apply it onto the pen. But just a lot of techniques that I think a lot of times they just are able to build over the years of experience. Um, and the other thing is, it's very common to have some sort of master to apprentice style learning. So like, for example, like the Danitrio artisans, there's one of them, his name is Masanori, and he is the oldest of the artisans in the lineup, but extremely healthy. He was actually featured in the last Pen World magazine, I think, for Danitrio. It was an article on, I think, what he does outside of like doing Urushi and Maki-E. And he's like this 80 some year old guy that's like extremely healthy. He does like a lot of hiking, and so he was like, I need to do all this to be able to allow my craft to still be at, you know, top shape. And so I thought that was really interesting. But he's one of the like masters that actually trained a lot of, or several of the other Danitrio artisans, and for them to also now be Maki artisans, and then some of their wives and sons, and have also become Maki artisans over time. So for example, for the video, that was Kogaku video. So Kogaku's son also is a Maki artisan. So I think sometimes it's like a lineage thing to be able to maybe transfer some of the knowledge from generation to generation. So as far as the layers of Urushi go, so one of the things is Urushi is essentially like sap that's extracted from the Urushi trees, typically in Asia. I think a lot of times people will talk about the differences between Japanese Urushi and then other Asian countries Urushi, because there are Urushi trees in other parts of Asia. Depending on what I've read up, there has been like some talks about if you move a tree from its original location, it's going to still lose some sort of like its like original quality. So if you take this tree, let's say from Japan, and put it in, let's say Taiwan or some other country, it just will not have the same quality, and it'll deteriorate more quickly. And so for Japanese urushi, they say that there's 80% urushiol. It's spelled Urushiol, which is one of the active ingredients in urushi, and it's like some sort of oil. And so the higher content of urushiol that you have in the urushi, the higher quality it is when you extract it raw. And so Japanese urushi tends to have that 80% or higher, whereas other countries are probably around the 60%. So a lot of times when people or when artisans are looking at urushi, sometimes that they're looking at that and maybe also evaluating maybe cost versus value. As far as the pen goes, there are multiple layers that are applied of urushi onto a pen, and that's to create either certain effects, and then also is to set it up so that you can put all the artwork that you want onto the pen. So there are three kind of main layers. I'm going to call it layer sections. So you have the base layer, then you have this interim layer, and then you have this outer layer. So the base layer, they call it shitaji niri. And then for the interim layer, it's called nakaniri. And then for the outer layer, is called uanuri. And so in order for the pen to be successful, I mean, every layer has to be done properly, but the base is extremely important because that's where you prep it. So all of the Danitrio pens use ebonite. It's very kind of warm to the touch, and it's it's a great substrate for urushi to mate against. So I think that's just why, you know, they use this vulcanized rubber ebonite as that base. So they'll usually do a lot of cleaning to prep that pen before they apply that first base layer. So that base layer sections could be multiple layers depending on how much they need to kind of set it up. So it can, you know, it's probably at least 2 layers to maybe 6 layers that they apply. And between each layer, you actually have to wait a certain amount of time for it to cure or set, because it's not like your household paint. Your household paint, it needs heat and it needs dryness for it to actually cure and set. Urushi is a little bit different in the way as you actually need it to be hot, but you need actually a certain amount of humidity. So I think optimal relative humidity is like 80%. And the heat itself is almost like if you're trying to steam sterilize something, it's like 120 degrees C. So they have these like special cabinets that some of these artisans will have, and they place the pens in there. And that way they have a nice controlled environment. But I think there are some artisans that may also just set it out in a room and just let it cure. It's just going to take much longer. So it can take, a couple days to a week's time to just get that one layer. And that's why it takes so long for Urushi fountain pens to be, made, just because it requires such patience in addition to the intricacy of the art form. So that's just something that's, very inherent to it, but also kind of just adds to, the interesting elements of it, because you have to apply that layer, wait, hope that it looks good, and then you apply that next layer. So yeah, it could take, a couple weeks just to get that base layer set up. And then next is your interim layer. So interim layers, that's the nakanuri. You're gonna apply that layer one more time. Could be multiple layers. If you're doing something like a taminiri finish, which is basically this very glossy, beautiful, uh, solid color finish. Maybe it's a few layers of nakanuri that it's applied of the color that they want to create. So typically the base layer is going to be very dark. It's usually some close to like black. And then your nakaniri is going to be the color that you want to produce and showcase on the pen. So if it's going to be a red color, then it's going there. I think for Danitrio, they like to use like some sort of vermilion Indian type red colorant that they mix, and they'll apply that on the pens for several layers, and then they put the outer layer on there. So for a taminiri finish, they use Suki Urushi, which is a very transparent Urushi, so that outside makes it very, very shiny. And then they end that with burnishing the pen. And so when I say burnishing, it's just some sort of polishing process. In Japan, they like to use charcoal because it's not super abrasive that you're going to start tearing up the finish. I think the grit level is just in the high thousands for those who are used to using like sandpaper. So they do use sandpaper, but only for very, very specific things that they're doing, usually for like a very localized area. But I think generally if they're doing the whole pen and they're just trying to polish the entire surface, it's going to be some sort of like charcoal material. So those are the layers of the pens. And we actually have a blog on our website that kind of highlights a couple of these things that people can read. So maybe going a little bit backwards again. So to be able to prepare the urushi, they actually will maybe buy it raw from a source, and then they may do their own refining themselves. It's very common. So the refining typically consists of using some sort of filtration process, but the filtration isn't automated. It's also a very hand manual thing to do. So they take a piece of paper. It's not a regular piece of paper. They call it Yoshinogami, and they use they call it Urushi Koshi process, where they put this put the liquid into the paper and then they wring it out, and that's the filtration. The amount of times that they wring it out is how much pure they're able to get the urushi to be. And that urushi, the more pure it is, the better it is to be applied, onto the pen. Typically the outer layers, they want it to be the most pure, so they're going to have more filtration cycles done on that urushi. So that's pretty good there. Is there any questions? Let's see. It's come up. Maybe I could slow down a little bit. Yes, environmental factors. So Dennis Groom did mention about environmental effects on plants that can impact the quality of the urushi. I think like if there's like a rain event and then the urushi gatherers then collect the sap off of the urushi trees for the urushi gathering, it can have an effect on, I think something about like just the purity is affected. And the other thing is you don't want like that water to get into the mixture because that'll also create some degradation. And apparently it smells too. Like at the beginning it'll smell, but then after like a month or something, the smell goes away. So depending on what contaminants are inside of that pen, or sorry, inside of the urushi, it can also have the smell. Oh, okay. I see. There's somebody has a question. What kinds of materials do they use for the colors? That's a very good question. I'll be honest, I actually don't know what kind of materials that they use to create the colorants. Um, I think the tough thing is colors is a very interesting subject, though I can say for Urushi, because they cannot make the exact same hue every single time because there's so much variation. So think of like manufacturing. When you manufacture something, you have some sort of like tolerances that you're trying to get in between to be able to meet like your specifications. For like urushi, it's very, very difficult because depending on which tree that you gather it from, it can be within the same vicinity and you can still get maybe a slightly different color. And so I think typically it'll come in some sort of like, you know, creamy or amber to a darker color. And so then they have to mix it with maybe their colorants that they're mixing with it. And so it's just not going to be the same every time, which also makes it unique, right? Every single one is very individualized, very personalized. So um, let's see, there's some more questions that came up here. So that's a very good question, Victor. If they're working with the sap, do they use gloves and similar to not get it on the skin, or they not allergic to it? So I think that's a very interesting subject. A lot of so the urushi trees are in that same family as like poison ivy. So people can be allergic to it, especially when they touch the raw urushi. But I know there's some people online, like some people on Instagram, that I kind of saw that are applying urushi, and they actually seem to be fairly resistant. It doesn't seem to affect them. So maybe it's just depending on each person, their sensitivity, but and maybe it's the urushi materials that they're using too. But for the most part, it's supposed to be like an irritant. And then once it's set, it doesn't create the same. It's no longer an irritant anymore. However, if people are allergic and are highly sensitive, always still be careful anyways. But typically it's not reactive anymore once it has set. So I can show a quick video maybe afterwards so you guys don't have to keep looking at my face the whole time to see how they gather the urushi. It's a couple minutes long, but I think you guys will enjoy it. How long might it take place to place the design on the pen? So that's a good question. So really just depends on what type of pen it is. So we have, so you have like the very like more, they call them basic paints in Danitrio. It's basically a solid color paint look where you have one color throughout the entire pen and that's it. Those pens are, more, there's less layers that need to be applied. So the time that it takes doesn't take as long. And so probably I would say a few weeks time, they can produce like one pen. But because there's so much waiting, they're like, I'm not going to just wait for this one pen to move on to the next pen. They're going to try to use maybe that same urushi on multiple pens. I think on average, like 10 grams of urushi is used on a pen, I believe. So they want to try to use it up because, there's also a shelf life attributed to the Urushi. So it's something that, you don't want to waste. Urushi is not cheap at all. Because think of your household paint, it's probably actually, I don't even know but there is a major difference between, 1 pound of Urushi versus 1 pound of household paint. So it's just two completely different things. So don't want to put that to waste at all. And going back to your question, so to put the design onto the pen, so if you're talking about, like, let's say a bird design or a dragon design, definitely can still vary depending on what type of techniques that they apply. There are techniques that maybe take longer, especially if they need to create a variation in topography. So if they need to make it a little bit more raised in an area because they wanted to create a certain effect versus like a flat surface, that's something that buildup can usually take a little bit more time. But what they do is they actually use a paper, I think they call it Minogami, and it's a process they call Okime to do transcriptions. So they'll sketch the design onto this Minogami paper, and then they paint, I think on the back of it, a very sticky Urushi. And then they actually, once they're done, they wrap that around the pen, and it leaves kind of like an outline of what they want to create. And then they'll start painting directly onto the pen with the various Urushi and Maki-E powders that they need. So it can take, maybe as quick as a month all the way to maybe even a year. Some of the Danitrio pens are just massive. So probably, I haven't seen any other pens as big as the Yokozunas, which means sumo champion in Japanese. So that product, you can, maybe I'll showcase that in a little bit, is just a very, very ginormous girthy pen. And the reason Danitrio created those is to really showcase the Maki-E work on a larger canvas. So that's why it's so large, and that will take many, many months to create, many, many months. All right, other questions? Whose nib does Danitrio use? So Danitrio does use a Bach nib. So often the questions are always asking about the tip sizes, and maybe what kind of output that it produces. So I always tell people, it's Western sizing for Danitrio, which is a little contrary than maybe some of the other pens in this category, like Nakayas or the Sailors, where they're using like an actual Japanese nib. So if you're looking to getting a Danitrio pen, I always say, if you're used to getting a Japanese pen with a Japanese nib, you want to go one nib's tip size smaller, to try to get the same nib, like the width of your application. As far as difference between Danitrio and Nakaya, it's another good question. So of course, I'm biased. I sell Danitrios, but I think they're both extremely exquisite. They both do a very, very fine job. I think I don't know as much about the artisans at Nakaya, but pretty much all of the Danitrio artisans currently are all Maki-E artisans and recognized as craftsmen in their work by the Japanese government. I think Nakayas are usually, what I've seen, cater to people who like the skinnier pens. Danitrio has a larger collection to me of like the more girthier pens. So I think people who tends to like the skinnier pens tends to like the Nakayas. I think that's from what I've noticed. But they both do very, very fine work. So I mean, I think they're extremely great on both sides. Danitrio also talks about using like genuine Urushi for their pens. So that's something that I know they always push on that. I don't know much about how, what selection of Urushis that Nakaya uses, but that's also something that Danitrio uses. So let me kind of get my face off of here and let you guys watch a pretty interesting video on Urushi gathering. Ken or anybody else stop me if I'm, taking too long or dragging things out. But
no, you're good, Jason. But I do want to interject a quick
Sure.
second.
Go ahead.
Everyone else, please make sure you're not sharing your screen, because I'm not sure if everyone else is seeing that jumping. I'm getting notifications of other people sharing their screens. I want to make sure that the video is nice and clean for everybody. So, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I know sometimes you click on the wrong thing, so no worries. All right, so let's play this video.
Craftsmen gather sap from trees, drop by drop, all by hand. Let's look at the special tools for this procedure. These are the main tools for urushi gathering. From the right, takapo, kama, urushi kanna, hera, eguri, and gonguri. Takapo is a container to keep the collected tree sap. Kama is a tool to peel the tree bark to smoothen the surface of the tree. Urushi kanna is used to give a cut called hand to a tree. Hera is a spatula to scrape off the sap. Eguri takes the very last drop of sap called udame at the end of each season. Finally, gonguri is used to pour urushi lacquer from takapo to a barrel. Let's take a tour of lacquer gathering with craftsman Miss Yamazaki. The first process is called kamazuri. She peels tree bark to flatten the surface. The next process is to take a urushi kanna to give a cut called hand to a tree. Then, very carefully, scraping off the tree sap by hera and pour it into takapo. Ms. Yamazaki repeats these procedures with 50 different trees a day. Once the tree is cut, she must wait 3 days to rest the tree. She cuts and gathers sap from 200 trees in one season alone. A skilled craftsman is able to finish these tasks with 100 trees daily and 400 trees every season. If the cut is not deep enough, the sap will not be produced. When a cut is too deep, the tree will die. Sap gathering is like collecting drops of life from trees. Precise decision is needed to see the difference of each tree to continue this process. The harmony of skilled craftsmen and nature is raising future craftsmen and supporting the high quality of urushi ware as well as the culture and tradition.
All right. Excellent. Cool. So you kind of get a feel of what they're doing. They create these striations and are able to collect just a little bit, from each tree every single day. When they cut the trees, it's kind of like, cutting yourself. That's probably not a good analogy. But, you have platelets and, blood that comes out, right? It's basically sort of bleeding the tree and you're extracting a little bit at a time. But if you cut too deep, you might hurt the tree, damage the tree. And there is a limit to how long that they can do this. I think they can only get a certain amount of urushi over a span of time before the tree is no longer able to produce, I guess, like extractable sap that they want to collect. So kind of very interesting there. All right, so let me jump to kind of demoing some of the pens. So this is I'm going to call it the pen booth. So give me 1 second here to grab a few. If you have particular pens that you guys like to see, I know a lot of the people who are in the United States typically like the Tamineri finishes. I can definitely showcase some of those. I also have some Maki-E finishes that I'll be showing you. All right, so this one right here is a Tamineri in shoe. on Genkai. So this pen right here is fairly large pen. I'm 5'5", you know, but it's very ergonomic the way that it's set up. So really allows you to really have a good grip on the pen. So I'm gonna just kind of showcase the nib right here. If I can get it to focus. It's got a little bit of my glove hairs. So it's a Danitrio medium nib tip. So it's got the very traditional edge tones where it's a little bit lighter because the way that they are polishing these pens, they usually have the edges kind of reveal the underlayers more. But to me, the Urushi red and that the artisans apply are just absolutely beautiful because it really shows kind of that profoundness and depth of the Tamaniri finish. So remember, this is where they apply a clear coat. It's not really perfectly clear. It's an amber clear over the outer aspect of the pen to really create that nice little finish there. So, but yeah, you can kind of see it on the ends of the pen as well. And the other thing to be able to distinguish a pen that's made by a Maki-E artisans is Maki-E artisans actually apply this red stamp. It's kind of like, I guess you can say, the seal of approval. So it's got their name and then their kind of Maki artisan nickname on there. So this is a Kogaku pen right here. So really beautiful one here. I'll show this one really quick. So that was the Genkai, one of the most, so that pen itself is actually one of the most popular pens that we have. This is the Mikado version. So Mikado's means emperor, Genkai means limits. So really this is probably my favorite Tamaniri color. It's just this wine red. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yep. Let's see, there's another pen that we've been getting a lot more inquiries lately. So this one's a much smaller pen. So the two that you saw were a little bit larger. This one's smaller for a Danitrio pen, but larger than what most people consider a small pen. So this one, you can see there's a gradient in that blue, and it just has this seamless transition into the rest of the pen. So this is kind of inspired by the woodblock printmaking. I think they call it ukiyo-e. And you'll see a lot of this type of gradient used in that kind of artwork. So let me open this one up. So for the Genkai Mikado you just saw, those were on a number 8 nib. This is a number 6 nib. And this has they call it the fireball nib on there. Here's the feed. I think there's a little bit of delay here. I think there's some questions. Let's see. Yes, there is a pen with frogs on it. I don't know if that's available. We don't have that on hand, but if people are interested in acquiring those, we do have since we are a authorized Danitrio dealer, we are able to source pens that they have maybe in their inventory. All right, so this one's another smaller pen, just to kind of show all the different bodies that the pens are on. So this one's called a Hyoton, and it is based off a fruit. They call it, I guess, calabash is the name of it. I've never actually eaten it myself, but it's this type of shape. So it's extremely ergonomic, in my opinion, because of this shape. And so it's very bulbous look. But the other thing, if you actually look carefully here, this pen is actually like individually dug out for the array of all these like recesses that you see there. Yep, and Rick is asking, is that the shape they used to call Mae West? And that is correct. It is. I think that was termed and coined by somebody here in the United States. So, yeah, based on the popular celebrity icon. So, and this one's actually hand painted by Masanori, and then another craftsman actually did the using a little tool. They dug out the pieces to make this very, very even pattern. And it also used a number 6 on this pen. And what I'll also do is I'll show you the cartridge converter that comes with these pens, so you can kind of see how it works. Should have done that on the eyedropper ones too. All right, so if I take this out here, it comes with a cartridge converter. It's got the trio on it, and yeah, it's just, you basically dip it into the ink, and then it's a piston, so it just creates vacuum and sucks it up. So it's removable. You can put a just a cartridge in there if you want to, instead of using this converter. So that's a kind of option there.
Can you eyedrop them since they're ebonite?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So that is something that some customers have been able to do successfully. I think to be able to create a good seal, it's probably recommended to use some silicone grease over the threads to ensure the ink doesn't leak. But they were technically designed for a cartridge converter setup. So I guess what I always say is it's not a guarantee that you can convert it to a eye drop filler, but it's been done, and there's several customers that do that currently. Let me go back to another one here. So let's see. Do it on this one. So this is another Mikado shape pen. So this one's a little bit different. It's not a glossy appearance. I describe it as a satin type of finish, and the satin basically is able to be produced because instead of doing this burnishing that they do at the very end, I think they actually don't burnish it at all. And it's able to create this appearance with just doing it in this way. So, but it looks kind of like Tamanuri because it has the edge tones that are revealed with the pen. You can see a number 8 nib. So Rick's asking is, does Danitrio make eyedropper pens? And the answer is yes. So this pen, for example, is using an eyedropper style. So you would actually take an eyedropper, suck it out of the, suck the ink out to collect an eyedropper and drip it into this chamber right here. So because Danitrio pens are usually bigger, the chamber can hold quite a bit of milliliters of ink. So this does have a shutoff valve. So if you look really, really carefully, they're so good at hiding it, but there is a line. And the reason there's a line is because that is the regulator to regulate the ink flow. So you can open it to allow for more ink to flow through and go down into the hole to the nib. But you can kind of tell as I turn this mechanism, I guess you can call it plunger, gets pulled away from this hole. So the more that you pull it away, the more ink flow that you have. I think there's a certain point where it doesn't really make a huge difference. But what some people do is they open it up, let the ink flow, and then they close it, and then they'll write with it, and then as soon as it runs, low again, they'll open it back up again. Some people just leave it open so that they get this nice gush. But yeah, it's kind of depending on the customer's preference. So writing on the section on this one. So this one's just the Maki-E artisan signature. So this is Masanori's. I should probably face it this way. So that's just Masanori's Maki-E stamp. And sometimes there is writing on the pen in like hiragana or one of their kind of phonetics. So, but I don't know if I have any right now. I don't think I have any in the pens, but yeah, sometimes I do write it on there. All right, so let me showcase the biggest pen that they have. So this is called the Yokozuna, so sumo champion, and I think that's a very good name for this pen. It's just massive. So, and this one's hand painted by Kogaku, and it's a Tamanuri. So it's in Tamanuri in AO, so AO. So one of the things that is interesting with colors is back in the day, green didn't really exist as a color. So yes, Danitrio sometimes still calls their green pens Midori, which you'll see in like Nakayas and pens like that. But like for Danitrio, a lot of times it's an AO, which means it could be a blue or a green, because blue and green were like the same thing like back in the day. So, but you can kind of see the beautiful undertone, and it's just extremely, extremely reflective. So, but speaking of how reflective it is, it really makes it hard to take photography of these type of pens because they're just so reflective. So like to really capture these in photography, like it's, you got to adjust the lighting, but still it's just, you have to see it in person to be able to get a glimpse of its like true beauty. So, but yeah, here's another one. You can kind of see the section here. Cool. So a very popular theme right here is the Aka Mount Fuji. So it's basically Mount Fuji, but at the kind of right time of year and day to capture that sunset. It's like red in the background, and so that's what they call it, Aka Mount Fuji. So if you look really carefully at this pen, the white is made out of quail egg shells. They call it renkaku. And then you can see that they use Maki-E powders to create the different textures. Yep, and this is on they call it Shohakaku shape. Number 6 nib. And then I always have to show this pen because this is just one of those pens that you just got to show people every time if you have one. So this is the 100 Kids. So this was hand painted by Kosetsu, another very well-known Maki artisans that does pens. So if you look really carefully, I believe there is actually 100 kids on here. So it's a symbol of like youth and liveliness. And it actually, I believe there's also a Maki-E box with the same theme. So this is on a Genkai. Yeah, so this one's, you can tell he made 18 of these pens, and this is number 7. There's another one I like to show. I don't know if anybody watches maybe some of the cartoons, Japanese cartoons, but this is also in other, other Asian cartoons. So it's called Sayuki in Japanese. So based on the Monkey King. So I think the story is called Journey to the West. But I think it's originally from China, and the Japanese have a lot of influences from like Chinese culture as well. So it's got all the characters on there. So it's got the half pig, half demon, and the monk. So let's see. Carry bullets. How much does it cost for the unique pen like the ones you're showing? I think for the 100 kids, it's 22,000. The Sayuki, I cannot remember. I would have to check the website. See if I can pull this up really quick. $16,000. Still cheaper than having 100 kids. I love it. I love it. All right, so another one I like to show here for Maki-E is this is another Hyotan pen, but this is based on the oldest Japanese play. So it's called No. So this is the Nomen pen, N-O-H. So this demon right here, or you can call it demoness if that's a real word, is actually a girl that was jealous and then turned into a demon. And these are just common characters. So this demon and then this young girl is common characters in the No play. And what the actors will typically wear as props is they'll wear these as masks, and they're also handcrafted masks with special wood, and it's cut up a certain way so that the acoustics when they sing will bounce off of the mask so that it's able to create a very unique sound. This also uses some radon, if you can see it. So on the middle of the flowers, that's why it's shiny. It's using some radon in there, and then just more Maki-E. So these honeycomb type of patterns kind of represents like home. I think it's actually based on a tortoise shell type of pattern. And then these triangles are a symbol of like protection. Takamaki on the flowers. Andrew's asking, yes, I believe so. I believe so. All right, so here's another one. So for people who like dragons, this is one of my favorite dragon pens. It's the double dragons. So this is a common imagery that you'd find in like some sort of Japanese art. And it's kind of a Kogaku's rendition of it. So you can see he's the dragon. It's a Japanese style dragon, which is usually very serpenty looking and usually more water based. And it's grabbing an orb. So they say that the dragons are like protectors of heaven and earth, and like the orb, the grabbing of the orb is symbolic of like balancing the two. And you can see how well they're able to make it like really seamless. So you can see this is the regulator. That's the regulator line. So they're able to match up the artwork really well. Awesome. Cool. Do you guys want to see more pens or want to talk about something else? Let me know. All right, I see a yes. More pens, says Andrew. All right, we'll do more pens. So this is another one. Dennis says, I don't think we'll get tired of these pens anytime soon. I agree. So this one is the hummingbird pen. So this one's kind of interesting. So hummingbirds aren't really in Japan, but they have a lot of symbolism for like good fortune. And so this one has a lot of, you know, raiden on it and some eggshells as well. So I really like the way that they painted that bird. And then you can see different techniques were applied for the other hummingbird. So this one is made by Yuhaku. And she is actually the wife of the other Danitrio artist, Kosetsu. So pretty interesting. She does a really great job on like nature and animals type of art forms. Yeah, that's that. So what else we got here? Grab another one from her collection. So this one's one of the ones for goldfishes. There we go. It's a good question. Okay, let me stop and maybe answer some questions here. So, do they work exclusively for Danitrio? So I think it depends on which artisan it is. I believe like Kogaku, and also, let's see, I think I've seen Kogaku is pretty much, I think he just makes pens for Danitrio. Masanori, I believe it's the same way. Kosetsu, I think he's worked with other companies, not frequently, maybe more in the past, but I think I've seen him work with other artists. So I don't really know how the contractual agreements go, but some of these artists seem to be pretty exclusive to Danitrio, though, from what I've seen. Does Danitrio do much raiden? So what I can say is I've seen them make some raiden pens that have like lots of raiden. So I think there's another one that was like a waterfall looking theme pen that they use raiden. But I would say for the most part, it's not as popular, I think, as compared to other brands. I think other brands tend to use more raiden. I think I would say that at least from what I've seen, I think the United States crowd definitely really likes raiden. So I think that's very appealing. And so I think it'd be great for Danitrio to also maybe bring a little bit more of that in some of their works. But I think one of the things that they highly respect is they also want to give the artisans the creative freedom to do what they want to do, you know, allow them to really express themselves. They also don't want to put like any sort of like budget necessarily on the pens. They want to be like, hey, like we want you to create the best art, so finish the job and then we'll pay you for, you know, whatever you've been able to create, because we trust that you're going to do an excellent job on this pen. Let's see, what other questions? Somebody mentioned they like koi. So Danitrio does produce some themes with the koi fish on there. I don't think there's any currently available. There was someone that asked me about that a couple weeks ago. Questions on custom requests. So that's a very interesting question. I would say it depends. So it's something that for the most part, since I've been working with them, there really hasn't been much significant custom work that they've done. I think in the past they did more of that. But right now the custom stuff would be more like, hey, you know, is it something we can add a clip to? Can we paint the tip? Or can we paint the clip with Nishiji Nuri? And maybe minor custom changes there, but from maybe like more significant ones, it may be something that they'll have to take case by case to see if the artisan is willing to also work with that.
Hey, Jason, Victor had asked a question a minute ago about the dragon pen that you showed. He wanted to know.
Oh, sorry, did I miss it?
Yeah, well, he just wanted to know if the orb that the dragon was holding is Raiden also.
Yes, it is. I'm sorry, I missed that question. So yes, that was Raiden as well. I believe it's abalone is what was applied on that one. So great question. All right. Raiden is to add a glint rather than bling. Love that statement. Okay. Does Danitrio actually turn bodies? Okay, so yes, so Danitrio does have a supplier that produces its ebonite pens. It does not actually manufacture per se its own thing. So you can kind of think of them as a contract. They're like contracting out the work, but they work closely with the artisans to establish their, you know, quality specifications and establish the designs that they want to be able to create. And it's a kind of a mutual collaboration. It's not like, hey, make this exactly like this. It's, hey, you know, this is a very unique, maybe historical theme that we want. Can you make this? And then the artisan may take that and be like, all right, let me put my rendition of this on there. Yep, that's good. And let's see what other questions. Okay, I think I covered a lot there. Yeah, feel free to keep on shooting questions out. Let me get some other things. So here's another one right here. This one's the parrots. So I think maybe a lot of people like me, like we like the animal themes here. So yeah, so you can kind of see there's always a little bit of sprinkle of Maki-E gold powder in the background on this. And then there's a lot more generous being applied at the bottom here. So this texture right here is called Nishiji and that's based off of the skin of the Asian pear. And if you've seen Asian pears, and every country likes to claim it, I think, in my opinion. So you see Korean pear, or you know, they a lot of Japanese pear. I've seen it in different names, but they have a grainy appearance. So there might be like just different, just like a slight variation depending on what country it's coming from. But they usually have a grainy appearance, and then they on the pens you'll sometimes see at the bottom. Maybe it's throughout the whole thing, or even on the clip. You may see it on the clip. So that's the parrot. Here's another one. So they have taminiri that's used in the background of a red. And then they have somebody playing a traditional Japanese instrument called the biwa. So, which is, I believe, inspired by the Chinese instrument of pipa, which is like it's a string instrument that makes a very, I don't like a bouncy noise, I guess I can explain it as, but very, very graceful sounding sound. Screen printing is one of the questions. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So I believe, so Danitrio does not do screen printing. So immediate answer to, is there screen printing used on Danitrio pens? It's a no. I believe I've seen it on platinum pens and maybe Namiki pens on their really kind of, I don't want to say low end, but you know, they're kind of more economical Urushi ones where I think they have screen printing and then they have some Urushi applied on their pens. But I think Danitrio, that's more, I would say, against their style, their approach. Like they really want to, I guess, maybe preserve the style and not be as mainstream necessarily with the style of work that they do. So they, I think, avoid the screen printing, which I think, you know, it's kind of a personal preference. Some people may like that, and you know, it's a blend. It's also probably more affordable. Okay, yeah, Namiki Nippon art. Yeah, that's right. Do you have one of the bamboo style pens? Yes, we do have those. Where did I put that? Second, guys. Yeah, I got all the ones that you want. Keep you guys from starving. That's another one here. So the one that's on our front page is a Nishiji Nuri in black. So again, that's using the Asian pear appearance. So gotta get closer to get a really good look here. And excuse my shaky hand. I cannot hold this thing very properly, apparently. So it's done by Masanori. And bamboo styled bodies are actually also an eye drop filler. And it uses a number 8 nib. So we got more of these. So it's not actually using Urushi to create the topography. These are actually just ebonite bodies that are cut in the shape of the bamboo. But still looks very unique because especially like the ridges, it really showcases some of the dynamic, kind of the dynamics of Urushi. So this one's using a different finish I haven't showed yet, but this is called Roiro Migaki. So as compared to the Tamaniri and the Irokeshi Dame, which was that satin finish. This one, it looks shiny because I have a lot of light on right now, but it's typically not as shiny, and you can see the color for what it is, I guess, more. So it's a very much more homogeneous appearance, less of the edge tones that you'll see in the Tabaniris, but it creates a different feel. Our Asian customers typically like the Roiro Migaki a little bit more than our, at least United States customers. Awesome. Okay. Works. All right. Maybe I'll showcase one more pen and then maybe we'll just wrap it up there. Maybe answer a couple more questions. So another like popular Japanese theme. So this is the Tengu. It's a kind of like a beaked creature. They call it like some sort of like heavenly sentinel. He's wielding a sword. And it's got some Raiden on there. This one's made by Kosetsu. Right. That sounds good. So yeah, I would say that is the pen booth right there. So hopefully you got a good, I guess, preview of the different pens that we have. I know, without being at a pen show, maybe hard to see it that close up in person. So at least it's somewhat close. And you can kind of get a feel for its beauty there. Any last questions? Yes, Danitrio pens are on the, I would say, upper end of the spectrum. So even the basic color paints are usually in the 1800 pluses side of things. I think one of the things that kind of results in it being at the higher end is they're using Maki artisans. It's not just an Urushi artisan. They're using genuine Urushi. So yes, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging. We do offer I call it a payment plan, but basically it's a layaway style where it can be broken up with the payments into months, where it's even broken months. And at the end of the payment, you would get the pen. So that's for people who still want to try to get it, but make it a little bit easier way to acquire it and reserve the pen. So awesome. So if anybody has any questions, you can send us an email. So my email is just jason@urushipen.com. So if anybody has any other specific questions, you can certainly send it over to me, and we'll get you sorted out. And hopefully, if you're looking for a pen, we can find you the one that you're looking for, and one that may make you happy to wield and write with. So, all right. Well, thank you so much, guys. This was really fun. I feel pretty good about this presentation. So kind of was feeling a little bit of pressure just being the first one. So thanks for everybody being so supportive.
Oh, you did awesome, Jason. Thanks so much for joining us. And I really, really enjoyed getting a little bit of the history and the, the scenes of kind of how they collect the Urushi sap and everything. It was all pretty interesting. I didn't know a lot of that. So, and the pens, of course, are absolutely beautiful. So thanks for coming and joining us. We really appreciate it. Awesome job.
Thank you. All right. You guys have a great rest of the weekend. I'm definitely excited to see what other people have in stock for sharing, because there's going to be a lot of great shows coming up. So stay tuned.
Yeah, very good. Thanks. And thanks everybody for joining in. Our next presentation is at 1 o'clock. And just to remind folks that had a specific registration. So it's not going to be in this Zoom room. If you haven't registered for it and you want to, you can go out to the site and do that. And that'll be going in about an hour and a half. And the registration link will take you to Eventbrite to sign up for that. So thank you all very much. And we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.